There is nothing you can say to prove that.
Am I to be Simplico again?
Mock as you will, but you are intruding into my world now.
The cogs and wheels of technology.
Science.
Science, technology, are all the same. A world in which there is no room for the sudden, the strange, the fey. A mundane world defrauded of its mysteries.
You say these things, yet science is a mystery to you.
No more a mystery than, say, legions rise from the dead. Again, your science cannot explain the rise of Frankenstein. Again, your science cannot explain the rise of Frankenstein, can it?
Victor Frankenstein made a decision, a definite, clear decision. He chose to do an experiment, to create a living being. That being was the Adam of his labours. Your diatribes of analysis do not notice the science. The science is invisible to you. You miss that Shelley was documenting an experiment. You hardly even know what an experiment is.
You have read
Modern Prometheus several times. You pay too little notice of your brother's bookshelf.
I thought it might be one of those volumes you could not bear to part with from childhood. A sentimental attachment. A sentimental attachment like your teddy bear. I feel you might not be unredeemable if you can hear just one line of poetry. Did I request thee, Maker, from my clay to mould me man? Did I solicit thee from darkness to promote me? There are no experiments in Shelley. She has a hulk of flesh rise from death and be an example to us all. Milton says what there is to say.
So, all the story tells us is not to tamper or we will fall from grace.
Oh!
Victor was a student, much like Conrad Dippel, who may have been the inspiration for the Doctor. He was versed in the chemistry and even the natural science of Erasmus Darwin.
You mean Charles?
I mean Charles. Frankenstein was 1818 and relied on the world view of Erasmus Darwin. Charles Darwin was 9 years of age. He did not write Origin for another 41 years. Shelley was writing
about the vindication of the rights of women.
About science, about experiment, about the new world system the Enlightenment had created. A world system that replaced fear and superstition with rationality and knowledge. The experiment of Victor Frankenstein was about chemistry, electricity. It was the year without a summer, and Shelley was in a world that was shifting. She knew some science. Science!
Who would want to know science?
Mary knew science. Jane Marcet's, some Swiss, wrote a book, Conversations on Chemistry, intended more especially for the female sex. Shelley had read this. She knew more about chemistry than you.
Unfair.
Not unfair. You may know the ins and outs of metaphor and symbol in the poetry of Milton and, quote, screeds. Screeds of snippets of words with a rhythm and a rhyme that lulls you with the drone of familiar noise as though the shape of words was sufficient.
Are you making a point or a speech?
Sufficient to communicate the reality. You live in a world that Aristotle would approve of. A world where experiments cannot go wrong.
Are you saying that Frankenstein's experiment went wrong? That Victor was a failed scientist, not a mad one?
Yes.
Oh.
You forget how close the story of Prometheus, the stealer of fire, and Pandora, the opener of boxes, is connected.
So? If this were me explaining Paradise Lost, you would ask, no, tell me to prove it. You would make some snide aside about demonstrating it. You would be asking for experiments and rattling test tubes at me. So, prove it. Prove that Victor Frankenstein was a scientist. A failed scientist. Convince me with science.
I am not entirely sure.
Build a time machine. That's science. Travel back to 1818 and ask Shelley.
Even if it were possible to build a time machine, Irina Arefyeva and Igor Volovich of Moscow's Stelkov Mathematical Institute think it is. We could only travel backwards.
Try that again. No, it's fine.
Even if it were possible to build a time machine, Irina Arefyeva and Igor Volovich of Moscow's Stelkov Mathematical Institute think it is. We could only travel backwards in time to the point where the time machine was invented. It is not scientifically possible to go to 1818.
So all this grand talk of science is just that. Grand talk.
But it might be possible to build a simulation. It could explain the science.
Another simulation?
Yeah,
Why?
they work.
Not always.
Always.
Not always the way you want them to.
Once.
Expect.
Wanting and expecting are very different.
And simulation and real life are very different too.
He did not have a name. He was variously called Your Adam and a fallen star and so on, but Shelley never named him.
It was common not to name a child until they were 7.
Very high infant mortality. It makes sense. It makes sense.
This simulation, will it be like last time?
Last time,
Yes, last time.
scientifically,
You know exactly what I mean. The Academy would take a dim view if...
it would be more than a dim view. All this simulation would need to do is explain the science of Frankenstein. It is a work of fiction. It is really not the same.
It never is. It never is the same. But we both know what happened last time.